Welcome to Dreamy Mystery. Here's what makes no sense about the very foundation of human civilization, Sumer. We're taught that civilization is a slow, arduous climb. Hunter-gatherers gradually settle, domesticate animals, plant crops, develop villages, then towns, and eventually, after millennia of incremental progress, perhaps a city. It's a neat, linear progression, a story of humanity slowly pulling itself up by its bootstraps. But then you look at Sumer, and that story, it just falls apart. Imagine an entire complex civilization seemingly appearing almost overnight, fully formed, with no discernible evolutionary precursors. We're talking about the world's first cities, the invention of writing, monumental architecture, sophisticated legal systems, advanced mathematics, astronomy, and even complex irrigation engineering, all emerging from the mud flats between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers around 4500 BCE, peaking around 2900 BCE, with a suddenness that still baffles archaeologists. Think about this for a second. We find evidence of early agricultural settlements, simple mud brick huts. Then, boom! Within a few centuries we have Uruk, a city of 50,000 people with massive ziggurats, an elaborate bureaucracy, and a written language capable of recording epic poetry. Where did all that knowledge come from? Who taught them? The conventional answer is that they figured it out themselves, through rapid innovation. But the sheer scale and speed of their development, the complexity of their social and technological systems, suggests something more profound, something that challenges our comfortable narrative of gradual human ascent. There are ancient Sumerian records, thousands upon thousands of clay tablets, that hint at a different story entirely. A narrative so unexpected it could genuinely change everything we think we know about humanity's past. If you're enjoying this journey through history, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And I'm always curious. Drop a comment letting me know what city and time zone you're watching from. There's something special about knowing this story is reaching people all over the world. Let's start with the obvious question nobody asks. How did Sumer happen? We often casually refer to Mesopotamia as the cradle of civilization. But that phrase sugarcoats a profound mystery. For millennia, Homo sapiens had roamed the earth, developing tools, art, and rudimentary social structures. Then, in a relatively small geographical area, the southern part of what is now Iraq, an entirely new level of societal organization burst forth. We're talking about the Uruk period, roughly 4000 to 3100 BCE. Where the first true cities rose. Not just large villages, mind you, but sprawling urban centres with specialised labour, social stratification, organised religion, and the infrastructure to support tens of thousands of inhabitants. These weren't isolated experiments, they were interconnected city-states, each a hub of innovation and power. Take Uruk, for instance. By 3200 BCE, its defensive walls enclosed an area of about 2.5 square miles, protecting a population estimated at 40,000 to 50,000 people. To put that into perspective, London wouldn't reach that population until the 13th century CE, some 4,500 years later. Uruk, like other Sumerian cities such as Eridu and Ur, wasn't just big, it was intricately designed. At its heart stood monumental temple complexes, like the Eanna district dedicated to the goddess Inanna, featuring structures like the White Temple on its ziggurat, rising 60 feet above the plain. These weren't mere buildings, they were feats of engineering and organised labour, constructed from millions of sun-dried mud bricks, a testament to a society capable of coordinating immense resources and manpower. And all of this, remember, without a clear precedent. The thing that truly blows my mind about Sumer is not just the scale of their cities, but the sheer number of foundational inventions they bequeathed to humanity. The wheel, for instance. While simple rolling logs existed, the Sumerians developed the wheeled vehicle, revolutionizing transport and pottery making. They invented the plough, dramatically increasing agricultural output. They created the first system of formal writing, cuneiform, initially pictographic, evolving into a complex system of wedge-shaped marks pressed into wet clay tablets. This wasn't just for recording taxes. These tablets documented laws, epic poems like the Epic of Gilgamesh, medical texts, and astronomical observations. They developed the sexagesimal or base-sti number system, which we still use today for telling time, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and for measuring circles, 3 times 60 degrees. They were mapping constellations, predicting eclipses, and developing sophisticated legal codes centuries before Hammurabi. This is where it gets genuinely interesting. The Sumerians themselves, often referred to as the black-headed people in their own texts, had no obvious linguistic or ethnic ties to the Semitic peoples who would later dominate the region. Their language, Sumerian, is a linguistic isolate, unrelated to any known language family. This further deepens the mystery of their origins. They didn't appear to migrate into the region as a distinct group with a fully formed culture. Instead, their civilization seems to have coalesced in situ, but with an astonishing, almost impossible acceleration of development. Think about this for a second. A civilization that invents writing, cities, advanced mathematics, astronomy, and complex legal systems, seemingly from scratch, in a time frame that defies our understanding of human progress. It's like discovering a fully functioning supercomputer in a Stone Age cave. We're not talking about a gradual evolution of complex ideas, but a sudden flowering of an entire knowledge system. Why did this happen here, and why so fast? The traditional explanation often points to the unique environmental pressures and opportunities of the Tigris and Euphrates floodplains, forcing cooperative efforts in irrigation and leading to surplus food, which then allowed for specialization. But is that enough to explain such a monumental leap? This is where the ancient records themselves become paramount. Thousands upon thousands of cuneiform tablets, excavated over the last 2 centuries, are still being translated, reinterpreted, and analysed. And within these vast archives of clay, there are texts that speak of things far stranger than tax receipts or epic battles. They speak of origins, of knowledge bestowed, of a time before the Great Flood, and of beings who walked among them, teaching them the very foundations of their civilization. These are the records that, if interpreted with an open mind, could genuinely change everything we know about humanity's early history. But what exactly do these records say? And why have their most provocative claims often been dismissed or overlooked? We're only getting started on this journey into the profound mysteries of Sumerian antiquity. But that's a story for the next chapter. Welcome back, fellow truth seekers, to the heart of the dreamy mystery. If you've been with us, you know we left off standing on the edge of a precipice, staring down at the astonishing chasm between our comfortable narrative of human history and the stark, undeniable reality of ancient Sumer. We marvelled at cities like Uruk, at the sheer suddenness of civilization, at the wheel, the plough, the law, and the stars, all appearing seemingly without a clear precedent. But here's where the true journey begins, where the whispers of the past turn into a roar. Because the Sumerians, those enigmatic black-headed people, didn't just build cities and invent writing, they wrote things down. Thousands upon thousands of cuneiform tablets, baked hard by the Mesopotamian sun, have been unearthed from the desert sands. These aren't just shopping lists or tax records, though those exist too. Oh no, these are the Sumerians' own accounts of their origins, their history, their very understanding of the cosmos and their place within it. Let me tell you, their story is nothing short of revolutionary. Think about this for a second. We are the inheritors of a linear, progressive view of history. We believe humanity started in caves, slowly chipped away at flint, gradually learned to farm, then built villages, and then, over millennia, evolved into complex societies. This is the bedrock of our understanding. But the Sumerians? They tell a different tale. A tale so audacious, so utterly unconventional, that most mainstream historians have relegated it to the realm of mere mythology. But what if it isn't myth? What if it's history, told from the perspective of the very people who lived it? These incredibly detailed records, etched into clay in those distinctive wedge-shaped marks, are our direct link to a civilization that emerged fully formed, a supernova of culture and innovation in the ancient world. Cuneiform itself, the world's first writing system, is a marvel. It wasn't a crude collection of pictograms that slowly evolved into a complex script. No, it was a sophisticated system from its earliest manifestations, capable of expressing abstract thought, complex legal codes, intricate astronomical observations, and deeply philosophical concepts. Imagine a supercomputer in a Stone Age cave. That's the scale of the anomaly we're discussing. And what did the Sumerians choose to write about with this groundbreaking invention? Everything. Their daily lives, their economy, their epic poems, their prayers, their laws, their proverbs. But most importantly for our purposes, they wrote about their origins. And here's the kicker. The Sumerians never claimed to have invented everything themselves. They never boasted of a slow, arduous climb from primitive existence to urban sophistication. Instead, their records speak, consistently and repeatedly, of knowledge bestowed. They speak of a time when kingship descended from heaven. They speak of me, divine decrees or civilizing principles, a comprehensive set of instructions that governed all aspects of Sumerian society, from agriculture and crafts to law and cultic practices. These me were not gradually discovered, they were given. This is a crucial point, one that conventional history often glosses over. The Sumerians, the very people who started it all, did not present themselves as self-made men and women who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They explicitly stated that their profound knowledge, their advanced societal structures, even their very understanding of their place in the cosmos, came from an external source. Dive a little deeper into these sources, shall we? When we read the Sumerian creation myths, the epic poems like the Enuma Elish, though primarily Akkadian, it draws heavily from Sumerian traditions, or the tales of Enki, we encounter figures that are far more than abstract deities. These are not ethereal spirits. They are depicted as powerful, often physically present beings who interact directly with humanity. They walk among them, they teach them, they guide them, and sometimes they even punish them. The Sumerians called these beings the Anunnaki, which translates to those who from heaven to earth came. Does that sound like a metaphorical concept to you? Or does it sound like a very literal description of beings who arrived from somewhere else? The texts describe them establishing the first cities, organizing the early human workforce, and imparting the very skills that allowed Sumerian civilization to flourish. We're talking about the blueprints for irrigation systems, the knowledge of metallurgy, the principles of writing. The intricate calculations of astronomy that allowed them to track celestial bodies with astonishing precision. Consider the city of Eridu, often cited by the Sumerians themselves as the very first city, established by the god Enki. The archaeological record shows Eridu as one of the earliest settlements in Mesopotamia, with a continuous sacred precinct spanning millennia. The Sumerians believed this city, and the knowledge it housed, was not built by human hands alone but initiated by the Anunnaki. They describe these beings as having specific roles, hierarchies, and even disagreements among themselves, a complex social structure that mirrors human society, yet operates on a vastly superior level of power and knowledge. And then there's the flood. The Great Flood. We usually associate this narrative with the biblical account of Noah, but the Sumerian version, centered around a character named Zusudra, the Sumerian Noah, predates it by millennia. This isn't just one isolated tale. It's a pervasive theme across multiple Sumerian texts. They speak of a cataclysmic flood that wiped out a previous age, a time before the current civilization, a time when these Anunnaki beings were even more directly involved in human affairs. Why is this significant? Because it provides a temporal marker. The Sumerians weren't just inventing stories. They were framing their history around monumental events. They were telling us that there was a world before their flood, a world that was different, and that their current civilization emerged after this devastating event with the guidance of these same heavenly beings. Now I can already hear the skeptical voices. It's just mythology. All ancient cultures have creation myths and flood legends, and yes, they do. But the Sumerian accounts are unique in their specificity, their consistency across diverse texts and thousands of years, and their direct correlation with the sudden, inexplicable emergence of their civilization. They don't speak of abstract gods who live in the clouds. They speak of powerful individuals who came down, who walked the earth, who taught humanity, and who established the very foundations of their society. We have been conditioned to interpret these narratives allegorically, to strip them of any literal historical truth. But what if we, for a moment, take the Sumerians at their word? What if the kingship descending from heaven wasn't a metaphor for divinely appointed rulers, but a literal description of leadership and governance being introduced by non-human entities? What if the me were not abstract concepts, but actual sets of instructions, kind of advanced curriculum delivered to a nascent humanity? This is where the comfortable narrative begins to fray, where the threads of our established understanding unravel. Because if the Sumerians were telling us the truth, if their civilization truly was jump-started by external advanced beings, then it changes everything. It means our linear progression of human development, our understanding of our own ingenuity, our very place in the cosmos, needs a radical re-evaluation. The archaeologists and historians, bless their diligent hearts, have done an incredible job unearthing these treasures. They catalogue them, translate them, and study them. But when it comes to the most provocative claims within these texts, they often retreat to the safety of mythology. They are baffled by the suddenness of Sumer. True, but they cannot or will not consider the implications of what the Sumerians themselves wrote about that suddenness. But we are not afraid to consider it. We are not afraid to question. Because the Sumerian records are not vague, ethereal tales. They are detailed, consistent, and remarkably coherent. They speak of a time when humanity was guided, when knowledge was imparted, and when the very trajectory of our species was irrevocably altered by those who from heaven to earth came. In the next chapter, we will pull back the veil even further. We will look at specific texts, specific names, and specific events described in these ancient tablets. We will examine the identities of these Anunnaki and explore the astonishing claims they make about their purpose, their interactions with early humanity, and the profound legacy they left behind. Prepare yourselves, because the story the Sumerians tell is far stranger and far more compelling than anything we have ever been taught. Welcome back to Dreamy Mystery, where we continue our journey into the astonishing origins of civilization, a journey that promises to change everything we thought we knew about humanity. Last time we peeled back the layers of conventional history, revealing the Sumerians' own consistent, persistent declaration. Their profound knowledge wasn't invented by them, but rather bestowed upon them. They spoke of the me, those divine decrees and civilizing principles given by beings they called the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Now, we move from the general to the specific. We're going to dive deep into those ancient Sumerian records, those wedge-marked clay tablets that have sat in museums for over a century, often dismissed as mere mythology. But what if we, for a moment, simply took the Sumerians at their word? What if we listened to their own accounts of who the Anunnaki were, what they did, and why they were here? Prepare yourselves, because the details are far more concrete, far more personal, and far more revolutionary than any myth could ever be. One of the most remarkable and perplexing of these ancient documents is the Sumerian King List. Imagine a single clay tablet, or a series of tablets, meticulously listing the kings of Sumer, their cities, and the length of their reigns. Sounds like a standard historical record, right? But this isn't just any king list. This document is a profound challenge to our understanding of time, history, and even human longevity. The king list opens with a truly astonishing declaration. When kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. This immediately ties into what we discussed, the idea that governance, the very concept of a ruler, was a divine gift, not a human invention. But then it gets truly mind-bending. The list details 8 kings who ruled before the Great Flood, and their reigns are not measured in years or even decades, but in tens of thousands of years. We're talking about kings like Alulim, who ruled for 28,800 years in Eridu, or Enmenluana of Bad Tibira, who reigned for a staggering 43,200 years. Think about that for a second. We're accustomed to rulers living for a few decades, maybe a century if we're stretching it. But the Sumerians, with their characteristic precision, recorded lifetimes that defy all biological understanding, lifetimes that make our entire recorded history seem like a blink of an eye. And here's the kicker. After listing these impossibly long reigns, the king list states, then the flood swept over. And after the flood, when kingship descended from heaven a second time, the reigns suddenly, dramatically become shorter. We're talking about hundreds of years, then decades, then even shorter, until they resemble the reigns of historical kings we recognize. This isn't a gradual tapering off. It's an abrupt, categorical shift. Why would a culture invent such a detailed yet biologically impossible historical document? Why the sharp demarcation at the flood? Could it be that these pre-diluvial rulers, with their extraordinary lifespans, were not human as we understand it, but rather the very beings who descended from heaven, the Anunnaki themselves? This brings us to the identities of these powerful Anunnaki. The Sumerian texts are not vague about them. They name them, describe their personalities, their domains, their conflicts, and their direct involvement in human affairs. These aren't abstract gods floating in some distant heaven. These are physically present beings who walk the earth, who build cities, who establish laws, who interact with humanity in a way that is utterly foreign to our modern concept of divinity. Let's meet some of the key players, the architects of early Sumerian civilization, according to their own records. First, there is Enlil. Often considered the supreme deity of the Sumerian pantheon, the Lord of Command, his name literally means Lord of Air or Lord of the Wind, and he was associated with storms, destiny, and the ultimate authority on earth. He was the one who enforced decrees, who could be stern and uncompromising. The texts depict him as the chief administrator of the Anunnaki's mission, the one who oversaw the establishment of order and the allocation of responsibilities. It was Enlil who, according to some accounts, brought about the Great Flood due to his frustration with humanity's growing noise and disobedience. He was the one who decided the fate of humanity, often appearing aloof yet immensely powerful. His temple, the Eker in Nippur, was considered the most sacred site in Sumer, the place where destinies were decreed. His presence was felt in every aspect of Sumerian life, from the thunder in the sky to the pronouncements of kings. Then we have Enki, perhaps the most fascinating and benevolent of the Anunnaki, the Lord of the Earth, whose domain was also the Abzu, the fresh underground waters. Enki was the god of wisdom, magic, crafts, and creation. He is consistently portrayed as the great civilizer, the one who directly gave the me, those divine principles of civilization, to humanity. While Enlil was the stern authority, Enki was the ingenious problem solver, the patron of artisans, and the one who often intervened on humanity's behalf. It was Enki who, in defiance of Enlil's decree, warned Ziusudra, the Sumerian Noah, of the impending Great Flood, and instructed him to build an ark, thus saving humanity from utter annihilation. Think about that. A disagreement among these gods directly impacting the fate of our species. Enki is the one credited with designing and implementing the intricate irrigation systems that made Sumer's barren mud flats bloom. He taught humanity how to build cities, how to work with metals, how to write, and how to understand the stars. His temple, the Iabzu in Eridu, was considered the first city established by the Anunnaki, the place where kingship first descended from heaven. His narratives are replete with direct, personal interactions, guiding humanity, sharing knowledge, and even creating new life forms. Next, we encounter Ninhursag, the Lady of the Mountain, also known as Ninti, Lady of Life. She was the great mother goddess, associated with fertility, healing, and creation. Alongside Enki, she played a crucial role in the creation of humanity itself, shaping them from clay, breathing life into them. She was often seen as the divine midwife, tending to the physical well-being of both the Anunnaki and early humans. Her temples were centers of healing and nurturing, and her presence underscored the life-giving aspects of the Anunnaki's involvement. Her stories often highlight her compassion and her role in sustaining life, balancing the more authoritative or intellectual roles of Enlil and Enki. And finally Henana, later known as Ishtar by the Akkadians, the goddess of love, beauty, war, and political power, was a dynamic, often tempestuous figure, deeply involved in the affairs of both gods and mortals. Her epic tales, like her descent into the underworld, speak of her power, her ambition, and her willingness to challenge even the most established authorities. She was the divine patroness of cities like Uruk, where her temple, the Eanna, was a massive central complex. Inanna represents the more active hands-on involvement of the Anunnaki in the day-to-day lives and political machinations of human rulers. She was not just an observer, she was a participant, a force to be reckoned with, both feared and adored. What we see in these accounts, consistently across thousands of tablets, is a narrative of tangible physical beings who were not merely worshipped from afar, but were present. They had physical forms, they ate, they drank, they had emotions, they had disagreements, and most importantly, they directly taught humanity. This isn't abstract theology. This is ancient history as told by the people who lived it. The me, those divine decrees and civilizing principles we talked about, weren't just vague concepts. The texts tell us they included specific instructions for kingship, priesthood, law, music, crafts, even prostitution. They covered the entire spectrum of what makes a civilization function. Enki is often depicted as the primary dispenser of these monks, ensuring humanity had the tools and knowledge to build a sophisticated society. This includes the incredibly advanced knowledge of astronomy, which allowed Sumerians to predict eclipses and chart planetary movements with astonishing accuracy, and their sexagesimal base 60 mathematical system, which is still the basis for our timekeeping and angular measurements today. It includes their metallurgy, allowing them to work with copper and bronze, and their sophisticated agricultural techniques, transforming the Tigris-Euphrates floodplains into fertile bread baskets. Now, think about what this means for our conventional understanding of history. Archaeologists and historians typically explain the sudden emergence of Sumerian civilization through concepts like diffusion, ideas spreading from one place to another, or independent invention, people figuring things out on their own. But how do you explain the simultaneous appearance of highly advanced writing, mathematics, astronomy, urban planning, complex legal codes, and monumental architecture, all without a clear evolutionary precedent? It's like finding a fully functional supercomputer in a Stone Age cave. We're told these things developed gradually, over millennia, yet in Sumer they appear almost fully formed. The Sumerians themselves offer a different explanation. It was given, it was taught, it was bestowed. Why do we, in our modern wisdom, so readily dismiss these consistent, detailed, and frankly, astonishing accounts as mythology? Is it because they don't fit our comfortable narrative of linear human progress? Is it because the idea of advanced beings from elsewhere interacting with early humanity is simply too much for our current paradigm to accept? We categorize ancient narratives into history and myth, but who are we to decide which is which, especially when the ancient authors themselves presented their stories as factual? We are faced with a profound choice: continue to interpret these ancient texts through a lens of skepticism, forcing them into a framework that struggles to explain the sheer suddenness and sophistication of Sumer. Or we can open our minds, take the Sumerians at their word, and allow their narrative to challenge the very foundations of our understanding of human origins. If the Sumerian King List is a record of actual rulers, then who were these beings who lived for tens of thousands of years? If Enlil, Enki, Ninhursag, and Inanna were not merely abstract gods, but physically present beings who descended from heaven, what was their true nature? And most importantly, what was their ultimate purpose in coming to Earth, in establishing civilization, and in shaping humanity itself? These questions lead us down a path far more intriguing than any conventional history book dares to tread, and in our next chapter, we will begin to explore the very purpose of the Anunnaki's presence, delving into the astonishing reasons the Sumerians themselves recorded for their arrival. Welcome back, truth seekers, to Dreamy Mystery, where we peel back the comfortable layers of history to expose the astonishing reality beneath. Last time we introduced the Anunnaki, those enigmatic beings Sumerian records insist came from heaven to earth. and their pivotal role in bestowing the fundamental building blocks of civilization upon humanity. We talked about kingship descending from heaven, and the me, divine decrees or civilizing principles, gifted to our ancestors. But let's be honest, for many this sounds like a fascinating myth, a grand narrative spun by ancient peoples to explain their own genius. The official narrative, the one taught in our schools and perpetuated in our textbooks, posits a gradual organic evolution of human society. From hunter-gatherer bands to agricultural villages, slowly, painstakingly over millennia, we supposedly developed the complex systems that define civilization. It's a story of human ingenuity, trial and error, slow progress. So here's the million-dollar question. If that's the case, why does Sumerian civilization appear so suddenly and fully formed? Why do we see a supercomputer in a Stone Age cave scenario playing out in the cradle of civilization? The Anunnaki aren't just a colourful detail in their stories. They are the solution the Sumerians themselves offer to this profound historical riddle. And when we look at the evidence, the Sumerian explanation starts to make a lot more sense than the conventional one. Think about this for a second. Writing. Cuneiform, the world's first known writing system, emerges in Sumer around 3200 BCE, primarily from the city of Uruk. It's not a simple pictographic system that slowly evolves into something more complex. No, it's a sophisticated, complex system of wedge-shaped marks, capable of expressing abstract ideas, legal codes, epic poems, and detailed administrative records almost right out of the gate. Where are the millennia of crude precursors? Where are the awkward, half-formed attempts that should litter the archaeological record if it was a purely human, gradual invention? They are largely absent. It's like discovering the internet fully operational in the 18th century. How do you explain that without some external input? The Sumerians didn't just invent writing, they mastered it. Their scribes were recording everything from temple inventories to astronomical observations, from legal disputes to the very origins of their world. This wasn't a slow crawl from simple scratches to complex script. It was a quantum leap, and the Sumerians tell us who taught them the Anunnaki. Specifically, Enki, the Lord of Wisdom, is often credited with sharing this profound gift. Then there's mathematics. The Sumerians developed a sexagesimal-based 60 number system, which we still use today for telling time, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and measuring angles, 3 degrees. This wasn't a simple counting system. It was incredibly advanced, enabling them to tackle complex architectural calculations, elaborate irrigation projects, and intricate astronomical observations. This system allowed them to predict lunar eclipses, track planetary movements with astonishing accuracy, and create calendars that rivaled later civilizations. How did a people supposedly emerging from primitive mud huts suddenly possess such profound mathematical and astronomical knowledge? Again, the conventional explanation struggles. We're told they figured it out, but how? Without advanced tools, without generations of accumulated data, without a theoretical framework that seems to appear from nowhere? The Sumerian texts, however, are clear. This knowledge, too, was part of the me, the civilizing principles given to them by their celestial instructors. They didn't invent astronomy, they were taught it. They didn't discover complex mathematics, it was revealed to them. And let's talk about the sheer scale of their urban centres. Uruk, around 3000 BCE, was not just a village. It was a bustling metropolis, perhaps the largest city in the world at the time, with a population estimated at 40,000 to 80,000 people within its massive walls, comparable to 13th century London. It boasted monumental architecture like the Iana district and the Anu Ziggurat. towering structures that required sophisticated engineering, organized labor on an unprecedented scale, and a mastery of materials science. How do you go from scattered settlements to a city of this magnitude, with a complex social hierarchy, specialized labor, and centralized administration, in what seems like the blink of an eye? Archaeologists, bless their hearts, are left scratching their heads, often resorting to terms like unprecedented, without clear precedent, or rapid and dramatic evolution. They describe a burst of innovation, a sudden flowering. But these are just descriptions of the what, not explanations of the how or why. They avoid the very explanation the Sumerians themselves provided. The Sumerian records portray the Anunnaki not as ethereal spirits, but as powerful physical beings who lived among them. They were the architects, the engineers, the urban planners. Enki, often depicted as a master craftsman and engineer, is said to have personally designed and overseen the construction of irrigation canals, transforming the arid Mesopotamian plains into fertile farmland, a feat of hydraulic engineering that sustained their burgeoning population. These were not mythical figures whispering ideas into dreams. They were active participants, hands-on instructors. Consider the Sumerian legal system. The Code of Ur-Nammu, predating Hammurabi's famous code by centuries, laid down specific laws, penalties, and judicial procedures. This wasn't just tribal custom, it was a highly organized, codified system designed to maintain order in a complex society. Where did the concept of such sophisticated jurisprudence come from? Again, the Sumerians attributed this to the principles of order and justice established by the Anunnaki. It's almost as if the Anunnaki provided a complete societal operating system, a template for civilization, and then helped humanity install it. They weren't just giving abstract ideas, they were providing detailed instructions, practical skills, and the foundational knowledge required for a complex society to function. This isn't just about primitive people looking up at the stars and making up stories. This is about the consistent testimony of a civilization that burst onto the scene with an astonishing array of advanced knowledge and skills, and then, without hesitation, attributed their sudden advancement to external benefactors. Why is this so difficult for mainstream academia to accept? Because accepting it would mean dismantling the entire edifice of our understanding of human history. It would mean admitting that our comfortable narrative of slow linear progress is incomplete, perhaps even fundamentally flawed. It would force us to confront the possibility that humanity's trajectory was not solely self-directed, but influenced by an intelligence beyond our current comprehension. The Sumerian records aren't just tales of gods, they are the most ancient historical accounts we possess, meticulously inscribed on clay tablets. They are the Sumerians' own explanation for their unparalleled achievements. And when we look at the undeniable archaeological evidence, the sudden appearance of writing, mathematics, astronomy, massive cities, and complex social structures, the Sumerian explanation, however radical, becomes the most logical one. We are left with a choice: either believe in an inexplicable, unprecedented, and utterly baffling burst of human genius that defies all known patterns of development, or seriously consider what the Sumerians themselves consistently claimed. They told us they were taught. They told us who taught them, and they left behind a detailed record of the knowledge and the beings who bestowed it. But what exactly did the Anunnaki teach them beyond the basics? What was the purpose of this grand civilizing project? And what do these ancient records reveal about the Anunnaki themselves, their origins, and their ultimate goals? The answers, my friends, are even more astonishing than the questions, and they are waiting for us, etched in clay, in the very heart of ancient Sumer. Join me next time as we delve deeper into the specific content of these ancient teachings and what they truly tell us about our shared past. Welcome back, fellow seekers of truth, to Dreamy Mystery. If you've been with us on this incredible journey, your mind is already buzzing with the profound implications of what we've uncovered in ancient Sumer. We've peeled back the layers of conventional history, challenging the comfortable narratives that neatly package human origins into a slow, linear progression. We've seen the impossible suddenness of Sumerian civilization, that inexplicable burst of genius that defies all archaeological expectations, and we've introduced you to the Sumerians' own astonishing explanation, the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. But now we must go deeper. It's not enough to simply say the Anunnaki were here. We need to explore how the Sumerians described their interaction, what they taught, and why this knowledge was bestowed rather than organically developed. This is where the story truly begins to diverge from anything you've ever been told. Think about this for a second. Imagine a civilization emerging from the mud flats of Mesopotamia, not just inventing writing, but also developing complex metallurgy, intricate irrigation systems, monumental architecture, advanced mathematics, and sophisticated legal codes, all at once without a clear evolutionary precedent. It's like finding a fully functional supercomputer in a Stone Age cave, and then imagine the cave dwellers telling you, "Oh, this was given to us, we were taught." This teaching is central to the Sumerian narrative, and it revolves around a concept utterly alien to our modern understanding, the me. We touched upon them briefly, but let's truly unpack this. The me, pronounced may, are not abstract ideas or vague divine inspirations. According to the Sumerians, they were concrete divine decrees or cosmic principles, a comprehensive set of rules, blueprints, and technologies that governed every aspect of civilized existence. They were the very fabric of Sumerian society, from the highest echelons of kingship down to the most mundane daily tasks. Imagine a vast encyclopedic database containing all the essential knowledge needed to build and sustain a complex civilization. That's what the Emmi were. The Sumerian texts describe them as originating with Enlil, the supreme authority, but entrusted to Enki, the Lord of Wisdom, in his Abzu, a mythical freshwater ocean beneath the earth, often associated with a subterranean dwelling or a place of profound knowledge. Enki, the benevolent Anunnaki figure, was the primary keeper and dispenser of these me. And what did these me include? Everything. We're talking about the me of kingship, of priesthood, of heroism, of justice, of truth, of music, of art, of craftsmanship, of metallurgy, of scribal arts, of weaving, of carpentry, of brickmaking, of irrigation, of agriculture, even of prostitution and lamentation. There were over 100 me listed in some texts, covering every single facet of what we define as civilization. This wasn't just a general blessing. It was a detailed, systematic imparting of knowledge. Consider the famous myth of Inanna and Enki, a fascinating tale that further illuminates the nature of the Mer. In this story, the goddess Inanna, eager to bring the full glory of civilization to her beloved city of Uruk, journeys to Enki's domain in Eridu. She plies him with drink, and in his inebriated generosity, Enki bestows upon her all the me. When he sobers up, he regrets his impulsive gift and tries to reclaim them, sending various monstrous creatures after Inanna as she makes her escape back to Uruk. But Inanna, through cunning and determination, successfully brings the me to Uruk, thereby establishing it as a preeminent center of culture and power. This isn't just a charming story, it's a symbolic narrative about the transmission of fundamental knowledge. It suggests that these blueprints for civilization were not gradually discovered through trial and error over millennia, but rather transferred, sometimes willingly, sometimes with a touch of divine mischief, from the Anunnaki to the nascent human cities. This is a critical distinction from our conventional understanding of innovation. So, if the Mi'wos were the theoretical blueprints, how did the Anunnaki act as the practical architects and teachers? The Sumerian records are remarkably consistent and detailed on this front. They paint a picture of the Anunnaki not as distant, ethereal gods, but as active, physically present supervisors and instructors. Let's look at the cities themselves. The Sumerians claim that their first city, Eridu, was established by Enki himself, not just inspired by him, but literally founded by him. Imagine an advanced team arriving, surveying the land, designing the layout, and supervising the initial construction of urban centres. This aligns perfectly with the archaeological suddenness of urbanism. We see these massive cities like Uruk, with its population reaching 40,000 to 50,000 by 3200 BCE, a scale comparable to 13th century London. How does a society go from scattered villages to sprawling metropolises in just a few centuries without an external guiding hand? The Sumerians say it was the Anunnaki who taught them city planning, monumental architecture, and the complex logistics required to sustain such populations. Then there's agriculture and irrigation. The land between the Tigris and Euphrates was fertile, yes, but it was also a challenging environment of marshes and unpredictable floods. The Sumerians mastered this landscape with an astonishingly sophisticated system of canals, dikes, and reservoirs. Who taught them this hydroengineering? The texts credit the Anunnaki with showing humanity how to harness the rivers, how to turn arid land into bountiful fields, and how to cultivate crops like barley and wheat with unprecedented efficiency. This wasn't just planting seeds, it was large-scale, coordinated infrastructure development. Consider metallurgy. The Sumerians were pioneers in working with copper, bronze, and even gold. They developed advanced techniques for smelting, casting, and alloying metals. This knowledge isn't intuitive, it requires a deep understanding of chemistry, physics, and geology. Did they just stumble upon it? Or were they taught by beings who already possessed this expertise? The Anunnaki in the Sumerian narratives are depicted as masters of various crafts, including metallurgy, passing on these intricate skills to their human charges, and of course writing and mathematics. We've already marvelled at cuneiform, the world's first writing system, and the sophisticated base 60 mathematical system. These aren't simple inventions, they are complex cognitive tools that require abstract thought, systematic organisation, and a profound understanding of symbols and numbers. The Sumerians explicitly state that the scribal arts, the very act of recording knowledge, were a gift from the Anunnaki. It's almost as if they were given the software and the hardware simultaneously. This brings us to the most controversial yet arguably most consistent aspect of the Sumerian accounts regarding the Anunnaki's interaction, their purpose in coming to Earth and their relationship with humanity. The Sumerian texts, particularly those dealing with creation myths, often depict humanity as being fashioned or created by the Anunnaki. And for what purpose? To labour. Yes, it's a stark and challenging concept, but it's there in the tablets. According to these ancient records, the Anunnaki themselves were engaged in arduous tasks, particularly the extraction of valuable resources. They grew weary of the toil and a council was held. It was Enki, with the assistance of the mother goddess Ninhursag, who proposed a solution: the creation of a primitive worker, the Luluamalu. This new being, created from existing hominids and infused with a essence of the Anunnaki, often interpreted as their genetic material or a spark of their intelligence, would take over the heavy labour. This is a narrative that challenges every fibre of our modern understanding of human dignity and origins. We are taught that humanity evolved naturally, driven by survival and ingenuity. But the Sumerians tell a different story, that our early ancestors were genetically modified or guided into existence to serve a specific function for an advanced, off-world species. They describe a direct, hands-on intervention in human evolution. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like science fiction. These are just myths, stories to explain the inexplicable. And that's precisely the comfortable narrative that mainstream academia has adopted for centuries. But let's pause and consider the implications of dismissing these accounts as mere mythology. Why is it that the Sumerians, who were so meticulously accurate in their astronomical observations, so precise in their mathematical calculations, and so detailed in their historical records like the King List, suddenly become purveyors of fanciful tales when it comes to the Anunnaki? Why do we accept their accounts of kings and battles, but reject their consistent, detailed descriptions of their creators and teachers? The sheer consistency across thousands of tablets from different cities and different eras about the Anunnaki and their role in establishing civilization is astounding. These aren't isolated anecdotes. They form a coherent, interconnected narrative that provides an explanation for the supercomputer in a Stone Age cave scenario that no conventional archaeological theory can adequately address. If we allow ourselves to entertain the possibility that the Sumerians were recording history as they understood it, history that included the direct involvement of beings they called the Anunnaki, then everything changes. Suddenly the why of their sudden advancement becomes clear. The how of their complex systems makes sense. It wasn't slow organic development. It was instruction. It was a transfer of knowledge, a jump-start. The Anunnaki, as described in these records, were not just spiritual guides. They were engineers, city planners, agronomists, metallurgists, and teachers. They organized labor, established hierarchies, and imparted the very structures of governance. They were the orchestrators of this unprecedented burst of civilization. So we are left with a profound question. If these detailed, consistent accounts of the Anunnaki are not myths, but rather historical records of an extraordinary interaction, what does that mean for our understanding of human origins? What does it mean for our place in the universe? And what else did these beings do here beyond kickstarting civilization? The tablets, my friends, hold even more astonishing revelations. They speak of events that predate recorded human memory, of cataclysms, and of a world very different from the one we envision. They speak of a time when the Anunnaki walked among us, not as distant deities, but as flesh and blood beings who shaped our destiny. And in our next chapter, we will delve deeper into these ancient texts, pulling back the veil on the Anunnaki's true impact and the secrets they left behind, secrets that truly have the power to change everything we think we know about humanity. Stay with us. The mystery is only just beginning to unfold. We've established that the Sumerians, with their unprecedented leap into civilization, gave us an answer for their impossible brilliance: the Anunnaki. These powerful beings, those who from heaven to earth came, didn't just visit, they intervened, profoundly and directly. They didn't just teach, they created. Humanity, the Lulu-Amalu, the primitive worker, was fashioned for a purpose: to relieve the Anunnaki of their arduous toil, specifically the extraction of vital resources. Think about that for a second. Our very existence, according to the oldest written records on Earth, wasn't some slow, unguided climb from the primeval ooze. It was a conscious, deliberate act of genetic manipulation, a solution to a labour problem. But once created, how did these new workers, us, function? How did they know what to do? How did a species just minutes in cosmic terms out of the wild suddenly build cities, farm vast fields, forge metals, and organise complex societies? This is where the concept of the me comes into play, and it's one of the most astonishing revelations from the Sumerian tablets. We touched upon it before, but let's truly grasp its magnitude. The me were not just random instructions, they were comprehensive divine decrees, a complete blueprint for civilization, bestowed upon humanity by the Anunnaki. Imagine downloading an entire operating system, fully configured and ready to run onto a blank computer. That's what the me were to early Sumerian society. These me encompassed everything, from the fundamental principles of kingship, law and justice, to the intricate details of agriculture, metallurgy, weaving, music and writing itself. They dictated the rituals for temple worship, the etiquette for social interaction, the methods for building canals, even the art of lovemaking. Every aspect of what we consider civilized life was pre-packaged, predefined and delivered. The Anunnaki didn't just give humanity a fish, they gave them the entire fishing industry, complete with boats, nets, processing plants, and a detailed user manual. Enki, the benevolent lord of wisdom, is often depicted as the primary conveyor of these me to humanity, particularly through his chosen priest-king Adapa, a figure sometimes associated with the biblical Adam, but that's a whole other rabbit hole we'll explore later. It was through these me that the cities, those monumental feats of engineering like Uruk and Eridu, rose from the mud flats with astonishing speed. It was through these me that the Sumerians developed their sophisticated legal codes, their advanced mathematics, and their precise astronomical observations. It was, in essence, the software that ran the Sumerian supercomputer. This concept utterly shatters the conventional narrative of gradual human invention and discovery. Where is the slow, arduous trial and error? Where are the millennia of incremental improvements? The Sumerian records insist there was none of that. There was a sudden, complete download of knowledge, a divine intervention that fast-tracked humanity into a fully functioning, highly organized society. This isn't just a convenient story, it's woven into the very fabric of their earliest texts, their hymns, their myths, and their administrative records. They believed it. They built their entire world on this foundation. But even with a perfect operating system, problems can arise, and problems did arise for the Anunnaki. The Sumerian tablets tell us a fascinating and frankly unsettling story about humanity's post-creation existence. While we were efficient workers, we were also, well, fruitful. The human population began to multiply rapidly, perhaps beyond the Anunnaki's initial projections or comfort level. Imagine a colony of ants created for a specific task, suddenly growing exponentially, their chatter and activity becoming a ceaseless din. The Anunnaki, particularly Enlil, the stern lord of command, grew increasingly agitated by the noise, the clamour, the sheer presence of humanity. The texts describe Enlil's growing irritation, his complaints about humanity's incessant clamour disturbing his divine rest. This wasn't just a minor annoyance. It became a profound existential problem for the Anunnaki. And so a council was called. A terrible decision was made. The Anunnaki, or at least a powerful faction among them led by Enlil, determined that humanity had become too numerous, too noisy, too much of a problem. Their solution: to utterly wipe them out, to send a devastating deluge, a great flood to cleanse the earth of their creation. This, my friends, is where the Sumerian records deliver one of their most profound challenges to our understanding of ancient history and mythology. Long before the Hebrew Bible, long before the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerians penned the story of the Great Deluge. Their account, preserved on tablets like the Eridu Genesis, is strikingly similar to later flood narratives, but with crucial Anunnaki-centric details. Enlil, fed up with humanity, proposes the annihilation. The other Anunnaki deities, bound by their oath or swayed by Enlil's authority, agree to keep the plan secret. But Enki, the clever and benevolent Lord of Wisdom, who had a hand in humanity's creation and had grown fond of his creatures, couldn't bring himself to let them perish. He broke his oath, not by directly telling a human, but by speaking to the reed wall of a hut where a righteous man, Ziusudra, known as Utnapishtim in the later Akkadian Epic of Gilgamesh, slept. Enki whispered instructions through the wall: tear down your house, build a boat. Abandon your possessions, save your life. The boat must be of specific dimensions, waterproofed with bitumen, and take on board the seed of all living things. Ziusudra, heeding the divine warning, built the massive ark. And then the heavens opened. For 7 days and 7 nights, the storm raged, the waters rose, engulfing the land, sweeping away cities and drowning humanity. The Sumerian account describes the Anunnaki themselves terrified by the destruction they had wrought. The goddesses wept like birthing women. The deities huddled together, cowering like dogs on the highest heavens, witnessing the annihilation below. They saw their efforts, their creation, being undone in a cataclysmic flood. It's a powerful, almost heartbreaking image of divine regret and terror. When the waters finally receded, Ziusudra emerged as the sole survivor of humanity, along with his family and the creatures he saved. The Anunnaki, initially furious at Enki's betrayal, eventually gathered. They smelled the sweet savour of Ziusudra's sacrifice, a moment of reconciliation and realization. Humanity, despite their best efforts to eradicate it, had survived. And here's where the narrative shifts once more, profoundly altering our understanding of post-flood history. Instead of recreating humanity from scratch, the Anunnaki decided to re-engage with the surviving humans, but with a new arrangement. They decreed that humanity's lifespans would be drastically shortened. No more tens of thousands of years, as with the pre-flood kings who were, in fact, the Anunnaki themselves. Now, human life would be fleeting, a mere blink in the eye of eternity. And then, the most crucial step, the re-establishment of civilization. But this time it was different. The Sumerian King List, which we explored earlier, states explicitly, after the flood, when kingship was lowered from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. This isn't just a poetic phrase. It signifies a pivotal moment. The Anunnaki didn't rule directly anymore, at least not in the same overt way. Instead, they appointed human kings. They bestowed kingship as a gift, a divine right, a system of governance that would bridge the gap between gods and mortals. These human kings were chosen, instructed, and empowered by the Anunnaki to manage humanity, to ensure order, and crucially, to continue the work, the worship, and the maintenance of the Anunnaki's earthly domains. The Mi were reinforced, the cities rebuilt, and civilization flourished anew, but under a new paradigm. Humanity was no longer just a raw labor force. We were now stewards, intermediaries, worshippers, and rulers, all under the watchful, albeit less, direct eyes of our creators. This explains the abrupt shift in the Sumerian King List, from impossibly long reigns to much shorter, more human lifespans. It explains the sudden re-emergence of sophisticated cities post-flood. It explains why the Sumerians insisted that their kings derived their authority directly from the heavens. It wasn't a myth, it was their recorded history of a cosmic intervention, a near annihilation, and a deliberate restructuring of human society by beings they knew intimately. So what does this mean for us? It means the story of humanity is far more complex, far more dramatic, and far more alien than our comfortable narratives suggest. It means we might not be the product of blind evolution alone, but of a purposeful, if sometimes capricious, design. It means the myths of a global flood, of divine creators, of super long-lived ancestors, might not be myths at all, but echoes of a history deliberately forgotten or meticulously reclassified by later generations. The Sumerian records are a testament to our profound past, a past that challenges every assumption we hold dear. If they were right about the flood, if they were right about the me, if they were right about the Anunnaki creating us, what else did those who from heaven to earth came, leave behind? What other secrets are still buried in the clay, waiting to rewrite our entire story? And perhaps more unsettlingly, what became of them? Did they leave, or are they still here, watching their creation navigate a world they so profoundly shaped? The tablets hold more answers, and the next revelations will shake the foundations of our reality even further. Welcome back, fellow seekers of truth, to our journey through the sands of time and the revelations etched in clay. If you've been with us, you know we've peeled back layers of what we thought we knew, only to find something far more profound, far more unsettling beneath. We've witnessed the Anunnaki, those beings from the heavens, create humanity, save a remnant from a devastating flood, and then, here's where it gets truly fascinating, re-establish civilization, but with a crucial paradigm-shifting difference. After the waters receded, after the world was cleansed, the Anunnaki, according to their own records, made a pivotal decision. They drastically shortened human lifespans. No more impossibly long reigns like those of the pre-flood kings on the Sumerian King List, reigns that stretched for tens of thousands of years, attributed to the Anunnaki themselves. Now, human kings would rule for mere decades, a blink in the eye of eternity. But why? And what did this new arrangement truly entail? This is where kingship lowered from heaven takes on a whole new dimension. It wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was the establishment of a meticulously designed system of governance, a blueprint for civilization that would echo through millennia, shaping every empire, every religion, every concept of divine right that followed. Think about this for a second. We're often taught that kingship evolved from tribal chieftains, from the strongest warriors, from those who could command loyalty through charisma or force. A natural progression, a human invention. But Sumerian records tell a different story. They assert unequivocally that kingship was bestowed. It was a gift, yes, but also a chain of command, a means of control, a system of management put in place by beings who had a vested interest in the efficient functioning of their earthly dominion. The Anunnaki, having decided against direct rule after the flood, perhaps due to the previous noisy nature of humanity, or perhaps for reasons we can only speculate about, needed intermediaries, they needed managers, they needed overseers who would ensure humanity continued its task, who would maintain order, and, crucially, who would ensure the continuous worship and provision for the Anunnaki themselves. These human kings became the ultimate middle managers, the designated liaisons between the divine and the mortal, Imagine the first human king chosen perhaps from among the survivors of the flood, or from a lineage deemed worthy. This individual wasn't just a powerful man, he was anointed. He was given the divine mandate, the me, the very essence of civilization, directly from the Anunnaki. His authority wasn't derived from popular consent or military might alone. It was supernatural, absolute, and beyond question. He was the shepherd of the black-headed people, appointed by the true owners of the flock. These kings, we discover in the tablets, were not merely figureheads. They were active participants in the Anunnaki's grand design. Their primary duties included building and maintaining the massive temples and ziggurats, those towering step pyramid structures that dominate the archaeological landscape of Sumer. These weren't just places of worship, friends. Oh no, these were the nerve centers, the communication hubs, the earthly residences where the Anunnaki were believed to dwell, or at least make their presence known. Each major Sumerian city, Uruk, Eridu, Ur, Nippur, Lagash, had its patron Anunnaki deity, and at the heart of each city stood the colossal temple complex dedicated to that deity. The king was the chief priest, the steward of the temple, the one responsible for ensuring the Anunnaki received their due. Offerings of food, drink, and the diligent labor of humanity. We're talking about vast estates, armies of temple workers, sophisticated irrigation systems, and massive granaries, all geared towards sustaining the Anunnaki and their earthly representatives. Think about the scale of these operations. We marvel at the pyramids of Egypt, but the ziggurats of Sumer often predate them, and represent an equally staggering feat of engineering and social organization. How did a nascent civilization, barely emerging from what historians call the Stone Age, suddenly command the resources, the architectural knowledge, the sheer manpower to construct such monumental structures? The conventional explanation involves gradual development, trial and error, slow technological progress. But the Sumerian records consistently point to something else: direct instruction. The Pam-me, those divine decrees and principles, were not abstract philosophical concepts. They were practical instructions for running a complex society. They included laws, administrative procedures, agricultural techniques, astronomical knowledge, metallurgical skills, and even the proper rituals for worship. The human kings were entrusted with upholding these me, with ensuring their dissemination and enforcement. They were the custodians of Anunnaki wisdom, the agents of Anunnaki will. This explains, in part, the astonishing suddenness and completeness of Sumerian civilization. It wasn't a slow crawl out of the mud, it was a quantum leap. Imagine giving a supercomputer to a Stone Age tribe and telling them, "Here are the instructions, build a city, develop laws, chart the stars." That's the kind of jump we're talking about. The Anunnaki provided the operating system, the hardware, and the user manual. The human kings were simply tasked with making it all work. So what was the Anunnaki's long-term plan here? Why shorten lifespans? Why delegate authority? Was it a test? Were they simply managing their resources more efficiently? The records suggest a more complex picture. With their new, less direct involvement, the Anunnaki appear to have been setting the stage for something else, something that allowed them to potentially withdraw further while still ensuring their legacy and their needs were met. The shortening of human lifespans could be seen as a way to prevent any single human from accumulating too much power or knowledge that might challenge Anunnaki authority. It ensured a constant turnover, a fresh slate of rulers who would be dependent on the Anunnaki for their legitimacy. It maintained the power imbalance, keeping humanity firmly in its place as the created, the managed. This is a profoundly different understanding of history, isn't it? It means that our earliest forms of governance, our very concept of authority, of law, of organized society, might not be purely human inventions. They might be legacies, inherited blueprints from a non-human intelligence. It challenges the very foundation of how we view our political evolution, our religious beliefs, and our place in the cosmos. And what about the Anunnaki themselves during this post-flood era? Were they still physically present, walking among their human proxies? The texts suggest yes, but perhaps with less direct interaction, more as overseeing deities residing in their temples, accessible only to the highest echelons of the priesthood and, of course, the kings. They were the silent partners, the ultimate authority figures, pulling the strings from behind the veil of the temple walls. This new order, with human kings acting as intermediaries, cemented the idea of a hierarchical society, with the divine at the apex, followed by their chosen representatives and then the masses. It established the template for every kingdom, every empire, every religious institution that would arise in the ancient world and beyond. The pharaohs of Egypt, the emperors of Rome, the divine right of kings in medieval Europe, could these all be distant echoes of the Anunnaki's initial design? We are looking at records that imply a deliberate engineered civilization, not an organic evolutionary one. And if this is true, then the questions multiply. What was the ultimate goal of this grand experiment? Why did the Anunnaki eventually recede from even this indirect oversight? Did they leave? Or are they still here in some form, observing the civilization they so meticulously crafted, a civilization that still unknowingly follows many of their ancient decrees? The Sumerian tablets, those thousands upon thousands of clay fragments, are not just historical documents. They are a direct challenge to our comfortable narrative. They are whispering, sometimes shouting, a story of creation, intervention, and a legacy that continues to shape us in ways we've never dared to imagine. As we delve deeper, prepare to confront the most unsettling question of all. If this is how humanity's story truly began, what does it mean for our future? And what secrets about the Anunnaki's ultimate purpose, their eventual departure, or their continued presence, might these ancient records still hold? The answer, my friends, is etched in the clay, waiting for us in the next chapter. Welcome back, fellow truth-seekers, to the heart of ancient Sumer, where the very foundations of our understanding continue to tremble. We've journeyed through the miraculous emergence of civilization, the benevolent and sometimes terrifying hand of the Anunnaki, and their perplexing decision to step back, leaving human kings as their proxies. But as we peel back another layer of these astonishing clay tablets, we're faced with questions that cut far deeper than mere historical anomaly. We're talking about the fundamental purpose behind this grand cosmic experiment. Think about it. Why would beings of such advanced intellect and capability bother to create us, teach us, even source us from a global catastrophe, only to then recede into the shadows? What was their ultimate goal? Was it truly just for gold, as some interpretations suggest? Or was the story of humanity, our very existence, part of a far more intricate, perhaps even audacious plan? This is where the Sumerian records become less about ancient history and more about existential philosophy. They hint at a purpose for humanity that extends beyond mere servitude, suggesting a deliberate, calculated project with consequences we are only now beginning to grasp. Let's revisit the creation of humanity, the Luluamalu, the primitive worker. The tablets, remember, describe a process that is anything but natural evolution. They speak of Enki and Ninhursag, the chief scientists, if you will, mixing essence, blood, and clay in a carefully controlled environment. This wasn't some haphazard biological accident. This was genetic engineering millennia before our species even conceived of the term. The texts are explicit. They took the essence of an Anunnaki god and combined it with the clay of the earth, a metaphor perhaps for indigenous hominid material to create the Adamu, the model man. Now stop for a moment and let that sink in. We are told through our comfortable mainstream narratives that humanity evolved gradually, a slow, arduous climb from primate to Homo sapiens, to Seru here, etched in mud that predates the very concept of written history by our conventional timeline, is a story of sudden, intentional creation. A story that suggests a cognitive leap, a spark of divine intelligence was infused into us. This isn't just a minor deviation from Darwinian theory, this is a complete rewrite of our origins. Consider the missing link that still baffles paleontologists. We have evidence of earlier hominids, yes, but the leap to Homo sapiens with our complex language, abstract thought, and inherent creativity remains a monumental enigma. Traditional science struggles to explain the sudden appearance of sophisticated tools, art, and symbolic thought without a clear evolutionary precedent. What if the Sumerians, in their ancient wisdom, were providing the answer all along? What if that missing link isn't missing at all but was engineered? The Anunnaki, these beings who from heaven to earth came, didn't just give us agriculture and writing. They gave us ourselves. They modified a precursor species, imbuing it with a higher intelligence, a capacity for civilization, and perhaps a spiritual awareness that allowed for communication with their gods. This wasn't just about creating a workforce. It was about creating a vessel capable of receiving and implementing their knowledge, their me. So what if the creation was so deliberate? What was the ultimate design? Was humanity a grand experiment in accelerated evolution, a living library for their vast knowledge, or something even more profound? The Sumerian texts, particularly the more obscure and less translated tablets, hint at a purpose that transcends simple resource extraction. While gold was undoubtedly important for their home planet's survival, as the legends tell us, the sheer investment in humanity suggests a deeper agenda. Imagine a highly advanced civilization traveling vast cosmic distances. They land on a resource-rich planet, but the indigenous life isn't suitable for complex labor. What do? They don't just enslave, they engineer. They create a species with enough intelligence to follow instructions, to innovate within parameters, to build and maintain a complex society, a colony, that serves their needs, but also perhaps satisfies a scientific curiosity. Were we, humanity, the ultimate project? A living, breathing testament to their genetic prowess, a self-sustaining ecosystem designed to thrive under their guidance, even after their direct involvement waned. This leads us to the most perplexing question of all. Why did they recede? Why, after such an immense investment, after shaping our very DNA and guiding our early steps, did the Anunnaki transition from direct rulers to distant observers, leaving human kings as their intermediaries? The tablets offer a few tantalizing clues, but nothing conclusive, leaving us to piece together the cosmic puzzle. Some texts suggest internal disagreements among the Anunnaki themselves, a weariness with earthly affairs, or perhaps a changing political landscape on their home planet. Others imply a planned obsolescence of their direct involvement, a test of humanity's capacity for self-governance. Was it a prime directive of sorts? an unwritten cosmic law dictating a non-interference policy once a species reached a certain level of development? Or was it simply that their primary mission on Earth had been accomplished, and humanity was now capable of maintaining the infrastructure they had established? The concept of lowering kingship from heaven is pivotal here. It signifies a transition, not an abandonment. The Anunnaki didn't disappear entirely, they simply shifted their mode of interaction. The ziggurats, those massive multi-tiered temple complexes, ceased being mere residences for the gods and became more like communication hubs, observatories and centers for ritualistic worship designed to maintain the connection. The human kings, now endowed with divine authority, became the stewards of the Anunnaki legacy, ensuring the continuity of their laws, their culture, and their societal structure. But did they truly leave? Or did they just become less visible? This is where the conspiracy theorist in all of us starts to hum. What if the Anunnaki, or at least some of them, never truly departed? What if they merely moved to a different plane of existence, a hidden base, or simply became observers from afar, using advanced technology to monitor their creation? The tablets occasionally speak of skyboats and fiery chariots, ascending and descending, even after kingship was established. These aren't just poetic metaphors, they're descriptions of technological marvels that continue to interact with the world. The idea that the gods left but promised to return is a recurring theme across countless ancient cultures, echoing the Sumerian narrative. It suggests a cyclical pattern of visitation, a periodic re-engagement with humanity. Could it be that our current era is simply a period of less direct intervention, a waiting game before the next cycle of Anunnaki presence begins? The sheer volume of untranslated Sumerian tablets, estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, holds the answers to these profound questions. Many remain unread, gathering dust in museum basements, deemed too fragmented, too obscure, or perhaps too heretical to our established historical paradigms. What other secrets do they hold about the Anunnaki's technology, their homeworld, their cosmic journey, or the true extent of their genetic manipulation of humanity? What if these dismissed texts contain detailed blueprints of Anunnaki technology? What if they describe their starfaring capabilities, their understanding of physics that far surpasses our own? What if they reveal the true nature of their home planet, Nibiru, often dismissed as myth, but described with startling consistency in the Sumerian accounts? We are standing on the precipice of a revelation that could shatter our most cherished beliefs about ourselves. The Sumerians, through their meticulous records, are telling us a story that challenges every conventional notion of human evolution and destiny. They are whispering across the millennia, urging us to question, to look beyond the comfortable narrative and to confront the astonishing possibility that we are not merely the product of blind chance, but the deliberate creation of beings from beyond our world. The implications are staggering. If we were engineered, if our intelligence was gifted, then what does that mean for our free will, for our purpose? And what happens when the engineers decide to check on their project again? The journey into these ancient records is far from over, and the next chapter promises to delve even deeper into the forbidden knowledge the Sumerians left behind, knowledge that could, quite literally, change everything we know about humanity. Prepare yourselves, because the secrets etched in clay are about to become even more unsettling. We left off at a precipice, didn't we? Humanity, having narrowly escaped total annihilation by the Great Flood, found itself in a drastically altered world. The Anunnaki, those magnificent, terrifying beings who had engineered our very existence, who had bestowed upon us the me, the divine blueprint for civilization itself, made a pivotal decision. They would no longer rule humanity directly. Instead, they initiated a system Sumerian texts describe as kingship lowered from heaven. Think about that phrase for a second, kingship lowered from heaven. It's not just a poetic flourish, is it? It implies a deliberate, conscious act. It speaks of a transfer of authority, a delegation, directly from the celestial to the terrestrial. This wasn't humanity organically evolving a leadership structure. This was a system installed, a new operating protocol for the human experiment. But why? Why, after all the effort of genetic engineering, of teaching us the intricacies of agriculture, metallurgy and the written word, would the Anunnaki step back? Was it weariness? Were they simply fed up with our noisy ways, as Enlil had so vehemently expressed before the flood? Or was there a deeper, more strategic reason behind their seeming withdrawal? The Sumerian records, those incredible clay tablets that continue to whisper secrets across millennia, paint a fascinating picture. They tell us that while the Anunnaki no longer walked amongst us as omnipresent rulers, they didn't entirely vanish. Oh no, the kings they selected, the ones whose authority was lowered from heaven, became their designated intermediaries. These human rulers were not absolute monarchs in the sense we understand today. They were more like divine stewards, tasked with managing humanity, maintaining order, and, crucially, ensuring the continued worship and provision for the Anunnaki. We see this played out in the very architecture of Sumerian cities. Those colossal ziggurats, those massive stepped pyramids dominating the urban landscape of places like Uruk and Ur, were not merely temples. They were described as the residences of the gods, the earthly dwelling places for the Anunnaki. Even after the Great Flood, even after kingship was established, the offerings continued, the rituals persisted, the grand temples were maintained. Why? Because the Anunnaki, though less visible, were still considered present, still residing within those sacred precincts, still requiring sustenance and respect. It's as if the divine architects, having laid the foundation and erected the initial structure of human civilization, decided it was time for the occupants to take over the day-to-day maintenance, while they retreated to the penthouse suite, observing from a vantage point. The me, those comprehensive divine decrees that governed everything from law to brewing beer, remained the guiding principles. Humanity was given the blueprint and told, now manage it yourselves, but remember who gave it to you, and don't forget your obligations. This is where the story truly shifts from direct intervention to a more subtle, yet profoundly influential oversight. The Anunnaki weren't gone. They were simply less accessible. Their presence became more symbolic, more ethereal, yet no less powerful. They were the silent partners, the watchful eyes from the heavens, perhaps even from within the very fabric of those towering ziggurats. Consider the implications of this. If humanity was a designed species, created for a specific purpose, to extract resources for the Anunnaki, did that purpose simply end after the flood, or did it evolve? Perhaps the new purpose was to manage the planet and its resources for them, autonomously but under their ultimate authority. Perhaps humanity was intended to become a self-sustaining colony, a living library of knowledge, a grand experiment in accelerated development, now running on its own, but with a built-in remote control. And what about those shortened lifespans we discussed? After the flood, human longevity drastically decreased from the antediluvian patriarchs who lived for hundreds, even thousands of years, to the lifespans we recognize today. Is this merely a biological consequence of a changed world, or another deliberate act by the Anunnaki? I lean towards the latter. A shorter lifespan means less accumulated knowledge, less time for a single individual to gain too much power or wisdom, less opportunity to truly challenge the established divine order. It keeps humanity in a state of perpetual renewal, perhaps making us easier to manage, easier to guide, and perhaps crucially less likely to remember the true, unvarnished history of our engineered origins. The conventional historical narrative struggles immensely with this period. It sees the rise of kingship as a natural progression, a societal innovation born out of necessity. But when we look at the Sumerian tablets, the story is far more complex, far more orchestrated. It suggests that our progression wasn't just organic, it was directed. We were given the tools, the knowledge, the very structure of society, and then, under the watchful gaze of our creators, told to build. This isn't just about ancient history. This is about our fundamental understanding of human agency and destiny. If our civilization was a gift, a carefully designed system, then what does that say about our supposed free will? Were we truly free, or were we operating within parameters set by our divine architects? The profound mystery doesn't end with their receding, it deepens. Why did they leave, or rather, why did they appear to leave? Was it due to internal conflicts among the Anunnaki themselves? Perhaps a continuation of the rivalry between Enlil and Enki, which we've seen play out in the story of the flood? Did these disagreements reach a point where a unified, direct rule over humanity became untenable? Or was it simply a matter of resource depletion on Earth, meaning their primary mission was accomplished, and they moved on to other worlds, leaving behind their experiment to flourish or fail? The tablets hint at a home planet, Nibiru, a celestial body with a vast elliptical orbit. Could their departures simply have been returns to their home world, only to come back when Nibiru's orbit brought it close to Earth once more? A cyclical presence, rather than a permanent abandonment? These are not trivial questions. These are the questions that, if answered truthfully by the Sumerian records, would fundamentally change everything we know about humanity. They would rewrite our textbooks, redefine our understanding of evolution, religion, and even our place in the cosmos. And here's where the conspiracy begins to feel less like a theory and more like an uncomfortable truth. Why are these Sumerian narratives so explicit in their descriptions of divine creators and engineered civilizations, so often relegated to the realm of myth and allegory by mainstream academia? Is it because the implications are too vast, too disruptive to our comfortable narrative of self-made progress? I believe the answer lies, still waiting to be fully deciphered, within the countless untranslated tablets scattered in museum basements and archaeological digs across the world. Imagine the stories yet untold, the details yet to be revealed. What further instructions did the Anunnaki leave for their human proxies? What specific criteria did they use to select those first kings? Were there hidden technologies, secret knowledge, passed down through these divine bloodlines? The Sumerians, those enigmatic black-headed people, laid the groundwork for everything we consider foundational to civilization. They gave us the wheel, the plough, irrigation, monumental architecture, intricate laws, mathematics, astronomy, and, crucially, writing. And they tell us explicitly that these gifts came from those who from heaven to earth came. The period following the flood and the establishment of kingship marks a subtle but significant shift in the Anunnaki's interaction with humanity. They moved from direct, hands-on management to a more remote supervisory role. Yet their presence, their influence, was undeniably woven into the very fabric of Sumerian society. Every aspect of life, from the planting of crops to the administration of justice, was understood to operate under divine decree, under the watchful eyes of the receding, yet ever-present Anunnaki. This wasn't an abandonment, it was a transition a transition into a new phase of the human experiment, a phase where we were given the reins, but with a clear understanding of who the true owners of the chariot were. The grand project continued, but with humanity now as the primary labour force, and the primary administrators, all under the ultimate authority of our mysterious creators. The unanswered questions loom large, demanding our attention. What was the ultimate goal of this entire cosmic endeavour? Were we meant to evolve to a certain point and then rejoin them? Were we a backup plan, a genetic repository? Or were we simply a temporary solution to a resource problem, now left to our own devices, like a forgotten garden? The journey into these ancient records is not just about history, it's about identity. It's about questioning everything we thought we knew about ourselves. And as we continue to peel back the layers of these Sumerian narratives, we are forced to confront a reality far stranger, far more profound than any conventional textbook dares to imagine. The Anunnaki may have receded, but their legacy, their secrets, and their ultimate intentions continue to shape our world even now, and the deepest truths, I believe, are still waiting to be unearthed, one cuneiform tablet at a time. The next revelation, I assure you, will shake the very foundations of our understanding. Welcome back, fellow seekers of truth, to the heart of ancient Sumer, where the dust of millennia still whispers secrets that could rewrite every page of our history books. We've journeyed through the astounding genesis of humanity, a story of creation not by divine breath, but by deliberate, advanced intervention. We've witnessed the Anunnaki, those formidable beings from the heavens, sculpt our very essence, imbue us with their essence, and set us upon this world as their labour force. We've seen them unleash a cataclysmic flood, then, in a twist of fate and defiance, allow humanity to endure. Now we arrive at a pivotal, perhaps into the most profoundly unsettling phase of this saga, the Anunnaki's recession. After the flood, after the radical shortening of human lifespans, after the establishment of kingship lowered from heaven, what truly happened to our cosmic overseers? Did they simply vanish? Did they pack up their advanced tech and head back to Nibiru, leaving their grand experiment to its own devices? Or was their withdrawal far more intricate, far more strategic than we have ever dared to imagine? Think about this for a second. These beings, who engineered our existence, who taught us everything from irrigation to astronomy, from law to metallurgy, who literally walked among us and ruled as our living gods, they didn't just disappear overnight. Their shift from direct, visible rule to a more remote supervisory role wasn't an abandonment, it was a recalibration. It was the next logical step in managing a self-sustaining colony, a vast human enterprise that had, by their own design, become too numerous and, yes, too noisy for constant, hands-on management. We're talking about a transition from being present, visible monarchs, to becoming the unseen architects, the silent partners, the ultimate authority residing just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. How did they achieve this? They did it through the me. Remember the me, those divine decrees, those comprehensive blueprints for civilization, those codes of conduct and knowledge that Enki so famously bestowed upon Inanna. They weren't just a list of rules, they were the very operating system of Sumerian society. They were the cultural, technological, and spiritual DNA that the Anunnaki imprinted upon humanity. With the me firmly established, humanity had the instructions for everything: how to build cities, how to govern, how to conduct trade, how to worship, how to manage agricultural cycles, even how to brew beer. It was a complete societal package, a pre-programmed framework for a functional civilization. This allowed the Anunnaki to step back without fear of their creation collapsing into chaos. They had installed the ultimate self-regulating mechanism. The me ensured the human colony would continue to thrive, continue to produce, and crucially continue to provide the offerings and worship that were, perhaps, far more than mere spiritual appeasement. And then there were the human kings. Oh, these kings were not just figureheads, they were the Anunnaki's chosen stewards, their direct representatives on earth. Kingship lowered from heaven means precisely that. The divine right to rule, the mandate from the heavens, was a direct appointment by the Anunnaki. These kings were not elected, they were selected. They were the intermediaries, the high priests, the administrators of the Anunnaki's earthly domain. They were tasked with maintaining order, ensuring the smooth functioning of society, and, most importantly, guaranteeing the continuous flow of resources and reverence to the ziggurats, those massive man-made mountains that served as both temples and, we suspect, command centers for their divine patrons. Consider the immense power wielded by these early kings. They were seen as semi-divine, their authority absolute, their pronouncements law. But their ultimate loyalty, their ultimate accountability, was not to their people but to the Anunnaki. This structure, this top-down hierarchy with the divine origin, became the bedrock for virtually every subsequent monarchy and religious institution in human history. From the pharaohs of Egypt who claimed descent from the gods, to the emperors of Rome who were deified, to the divine right of European monarchs, the echo of Sumerian kingship is unmistakable. It's a legacy that screams, "We were put here by higher powers, but why? The recession. Why did they choose to become less visible?" This, my friends, is where the mystery deepens, where the conventional explanations falter, and where the Sumerian records offer tantalizing, albeit fragmented, clues. Was it resource depletion on Earth? Perhaps the gold they sought having been sufficiently extracted, or at least enough to sustain them for a time? Was it internal conflicts among the Anunnaki themselves? Epic power struggles that made Earth a less desirable posting or necessitated a strategic retreat? We've seen hints of this with Enlil's wrath and Enki's defiance over humanity. What if those were just minor skirmishes compared to the larger celestial politics at play? Or was it a planned withdrawal, a cyclical return to their home planet Nibiru, a place that Sumerian texts describe as having an incredibly long orbital period? If their visits were indeed cyclical, then their departure might have been as natural and predictable to them as the changing seasons are to us. They might have simply completed a phase of their mission, leaving behind a self-operating system to manage things until their next return. This idea of cyclical returns is particularly profound. It suggests that their recession isn't an end, but merely an intermission. It raises the chilling possibility that the Anunnaki didn't truly leave Earth, but rather became less visible, retreating into their ziggurats, their hidden enclaves, or perhaps even into dimensions beyond our immediate perception, continuing to observe, to influence, to manage their creation from the shadows. Imagine a supercomputer in a Stone Age cave. The people might not understand its workings, but its effects are undeniable. The Anunnaki, in their wisdom and advanced technology, might have simply become the ultimate hidden hand. The implications of this are staggering. If humanity was engineered and then managed through a system of divine decrees and appointed kings, what does that say about our free will? What does it say about our destiny? Are we truly masters of our own fate, or are we still, in some fundamental way, operating within the parameters set by our creators? The Sumerian records, when read without the lens of modern prejudice, consistently paint a picture of humanity as a project, a creation with a purpose and a colony under long-term management. This isn't just about ancient history, it's about our present and our future. If the Anunnaki's influence was so deeply embedded in the very fabric of early civilization, then its echoes must still resonate in our institutions, our beliefs, our very understanding of what it means to be human. The stories of gods on mountaintops, of divine intervention, of chosen people, are these not faint memories, distorted echoes, of a very real, very physical presence that once walked among us? As we peel back these layers of time, we're not just uncovering old myths, we're challenging the comfortable narrative of gradual, linear human progress, driven solely by our own ingenuity. We're confronting the possibility that our foundational knowledge, our societal structures, even our genetic makeup bear the indelible mark of an intelligence far beyond our own, an intelligence that orchestrated our rise, managed our development, and then, for reasons still shrouded in mystery, chose to recede into the background. But the question remains, are they truly gone? Or are they merely waiting, observing, perhaps preparing for a return? The Sumerian tablets, those thousands upon thousands of untranslated clay fragments, might hold the answer. They might contain the precise reasons for their recession, the protocols for their eventual return, or even further details of the genetic manipulations and technological advancements that lie at the heart of our very existence. The journey continues, and the deeper we delve into these ancient Sumerian records, the more we realize that the story of humanity is far grander, far stranger, and infinitely more mysterious than we ever dared to imagine. And the next chapter, my friends, will take us even closer to the ultimate truth hidden within these ancient whispers. Prepare yourselves, for what we uncover next might just change everything you thought you knew about your own place in the cosmos. Welcome back, truth seekers, to the heart of the Sumerian enigma. We've journeyed through the creation of humanity, the defiance of Enki, the devastation of the Great Flood, and the shocking decree that followed, the shortening of human lifespans. Now, we stand at the precipice of a new world order, one orchestrated by the very beings who shaped us, the Anunnaki. Remember, after the flood, the Anunnaki didn't just vanish. Oh no, that would have been far too simple, far too conventional for this extraordinary saga. Instead, they enacted a profound shift in their interaction with humanity. They established what the ancient texts explicitly call kingship lowered from heaven. Think about that phrase for a moment. It doesn't say kingship evolved from humanity, or kingship arose from tribal leaders. It's a direct divine intervention, a gift, or perhaps a strategically placed mechanism of control. What does kingship lowered from heaven truly mean for us, for our understanding of power, governance, and the very concept of civilization? It means that the first kings, the very first rulers of these burgeoning Sumerian city-states, were not self-appointed warlords or charismatic chieftains who clawed their way to the top. No, the records are clear. These kings were chosen, endowed, and sanctioned by the Anunnaki themselves. They were divine stewards, intermediaries between the celestial architects and their human creation. Imagine the earliest cities of Sumer: Kish, Lagash. We're talking about populations numbering in the tens of thousands, with complex social structures, monumental architecture, and an intricate division of labour. How did such societies, seemingly overnight, coalesce into such organised entities? Conventional history points to gradual development, the slow aggregation of power, the emergence of strong leaders through natural selection. But Sumerian records paint a vastly different picture. They describe a system that was handed down, a blueprint for order and governance directly from the gods. These early kings weren't just figureheads. They were the Anunnaki's administrators on Earth. Their primary duties were to maintain order, ensure the proper worship of the Anunnaki, which, let's be honest, often meant facilitating the flow of resources to the Anunnaki, and crucially, to manage society according to a set of comprehensive divine decrees. These decrees, these foundational principles of civilization, were known as the Me. The Me. If the Anunnaki are the architects, and humanity the creation, then the Me are the operating system, the software that makes the entire Sumerian civilization run. The Sumerians described the Me as a collection of divine laws, institutions, rituals, technologies, and ethical concepts that governed every single aspect of their organized existence. This wasn't just a basic set of commandments, this was an entire societal infrastructure, delivered whole cloth. We're talking about hundreds of Me detailed in various Sumerian myths and hymns, particularly in the incredible text known as Enki and the Me. In this epic, the goddess Inanna, seeking to bring prosperity and power to her city of Uruk, travels to Eridu, the city of Enki. She cunningly or charmingly, depending on the translation and your perspective, acquires the Me from Enki, bringing them back to Uruk. The list of Me she acquires is astonishing in its breadth and sophistication. Think about this. The Me included principles of justice and law, such as truth and righteousness, the rendering of decisions. They encompass social structures like kingship and a priesthood, a lordship and heroism. They detailed crafts and technologies, carpentry, smithing, leatherworking, basket weaving and scribal art. They even prescribed abstract concepts like fear, terror, strife, victory, and counsel. And yes, they included the Me of sexual intercourse, prostitution, and the art of lovemaking. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was left out. This isn't the slow organic development of human culture, where societies gradually figure out how to organize themselves, develop laws through trial and error, and invent technologies piece by piece over millennia. No, this is a fully formed, highly advanced societal package, downloaded, if you will, directly into the nascent Sumerian civilization. It's like finding a supercomputer and its complete operating manual in a Stone Age cave. It simply doesn't fit the established narrative of human progression. The Me provided the framework for everything. How to build a city, how to irrigate fields, how to establish a legal system, how to conduct religious ceremonies, how to wage war, how to make music, how to raise children. It was a comprehensive divine blueprint, an instruction manual for civilization itself. And who provided this manual? The Anunnaki. Specifically Enki, the Lord of Wisdom, the same being who defied Enlil to save humanity from the flood. This explains the bewildering speed of Sumerian advancement. We talk about the Sumerian miracle, the sudden leap from scattered agricultural villages to the world's first cities, complete with writing, complex mathematics, astronomy, advanced metallurgy, monumental architecture, and sophisticated legal codes, all within a few centuries. Mainstream archaeology struggles to account for this suddenness, this without clear precedent phenomenon. But when you consider the Me, when you accept the Sumerian account of divine instruction, the pieces begin to fall into place. It wasn't an organic evolution, it was an implantation. So the kings, chosen by the Anunnaki, were tasked with upholding and administering these Me. They were the living embodiment of the divine order on earth. Their palaces were not just administrative centers, they were extensions of the ziggurats, those massive artificial mountains reaching towards the heavens, which we've discussed before as potential Anunnaki command centers or even residences. The king's authority was absolute because it was divinely sanctioned. To defy the king was to defy the gods. This system effectively allowed the Anunnaki to recede from direct, visible rule while still maintaining profound influence and control. They became less accessible, less physically present in the daily lives of humans, yet their presence was woven into the very fabric of society through the kings and the me. They were no longer the visible overseers, but the hidden architects, watching their grand experiment unfold from their lofty ziggurat perches, from even greater distances. But why recede? Why this shift from direct interaction to a system of proxies and divine decrees? Was it a result of internal conflicts among the Anunnaki, as some texts hint at? Was it due to the depletion of resources they sought, making humanity's labour less critical? Or was it part of a grander, cyclical plan, perhaps a return to their home planet Nibiru, only to return again at a predetermined time? The records are tantalizingly vague on the ultimate why. They only describe the what and the how. What we are left with is a profound question. Did they truly depart, leaving humanity to navigate the complex system they had established? Or did they merely become hidden observers, continuing to influence human destiny from the shadows through the very structures of power and belief they had so meticulously crafted? The kingship lowered from heaven and the comprehensive me suggest an ongoing calculated influence rather than a complete abandonment. It implies a long-term strategy, a carefully designed framework for human civilization that continues to shape us even today. For if the very foundations of our societal structures, our laws, our concepts of justice and our technological advancements were seeded by an external non-human intelligence, then everything we know about humanity, about our origins, our evolution, and our free will, changes. We are not just talking about ancient myths anymore. We are talking about potential historical facts, recorded by the very people who lived them, that challenge the core tenets of our comfortable modern narrative. And if this is true, then the Anunnaki's influence didn't just end with the last Sumerian king. It might still be subtly guiding, subtly shaping, subtly observing us, even now. In our next chapter, we will delve into the incredible details of Sumerian astronomy and mathematics. Knowledge that seems impossibly advanced for its time, knowledge that some believe directly reflects the Anunnaki's own sophisticated understanding of the cosmos. Prepare to have your mind stretched even further as we uncover more evidence that points not to gradual human discovery, but to direct divine instruction. The stars themselves may hold the next key to unlocking the truth about our engineered past.